Well, hello everyone again. As promised, I'm going to give a quick oil change service overview. Um, I know a lot of people always asking about oils, what to do, what to use. So wanted to do a quick rundown myself and give you my spin on what an oil service should entail. So for me, one of the first things to keep in mind, I do have a catch can, and I do believe in catch cans. So why don't all cars have catch cans? It's because generally people will forget to actually empty them, and therefore they will eventually overflow. So part of a typical service would be to include emptying the catch can and just have a look at what's in there as well. So that's part of the job. The other thing as well, you'll see 0W40 Dexos. You've got reference to Dexos there. So many people talking about, what sort of oil do I use? As far as I'm concerned, the specification is more important than the actual brand. Now, I'm looking at the owner's manual for the 2019. And in there it talks about selecting the right engine oil, and it says that engine oils that have been approved by HSV, which is Holden Special Vehicles in Australia, is meeting the Dexos 2 specification, are marked with the Dexos 2 approved logo. So it's pretty obvious this logo that we're talking about here. And then it goes on to say the actual grade of oil is 0W40, and if you don't have 0W40, then 5W30 Dexos 1 full synthetic may be used for street use if you're not going to be tracking your car. So what have I got? I have used Mobil 1 up until now, but you'll find this Newlon oil comes in a lot cheaper than Mobil 1. But what do we got? Dexos 2. General Motors, Holden and HSV warranty approved. And I think it's about 9 litres in metric terms. These bottles are 6 litres each, so I've got more than enough with 2 bottles, which works out way cheaper than trying to buy the correct number of pints of the Mobil 1, which I've got a spare bottle there of. Look, people can go out and put whatever oils they want to into their Camaro, but as far as I'm concerned, making sure that the right grade, either 0W40 or 5W30 and Dexos 2, as for me, that's the critical stuff. If you ever run into any sort of problems with your car and you're going to have to explain that it's not your fault and it's an actual warranty issue, you've got to start with making sure you got the right lubricant in your engine. Also, Ryco filters. Last time I used a GM filter, but the Ryco is a good brand once again. I think that's the right one. I'll have to double check, but Z663ST. I'll make sure that that's correct before I put it in. The only other thing I can suggest is make sure that you do update your service book, regardless of whether you're doing your work at home or getting it done by a dealer. Having all of your records in here for the day you sell your vehicle is certainly going to be a lot better than not having recorded when the oil service was done, or the actual car service, I should say. It's not just oil. There is some other maintenance requirements to do. So just make sure that you do it to meet the requirements of the relevant service coupon. You shouldn't go too far wrong. A lot of it's just inspection, resetting the engine oil system. They say rotate the tyres, but these are directional tyres and they're offset as well, so you can't rotate these tyres. You can inspect them, make sure that they're not actually worn on the insides or outsides or whatever, and determine whether you need a wheel alignment, but yeah, there won't be any rotation going on. Anyway, we'll get into it. I do have a hoist now, so I'm going to use it. And it's probably a good opportunity just to point out exactly what you're doing under there for those that are not familiar with an oil change. Although I have to stress, if you don't know where an oil sump plug is and an oil filter, you probably shouldn't be doing the job yourself anyway, but I know there's always people out there that want to give it a go. So let me show you around. Okay, so under the car, you've got the aluminium cross member, you've got your sump, which is the bottom of your engine, and you've got your drain plug here. So the drain plug's typically towards the bottom-most point of the sump, and that's to ensure all of the oil will come out when you undo it. You've also got your oil filter, which is in these engines sort of pushed up into a little pocket, which makes it a little bit harder to get out, but again, you need to have the right sort of oil filter clamps and making the job easier to be able to remove that. Apart from that, everything else is from the top of the car. So again, if you've got your car on jack stands and ramps, you'll be able to easily access these two for the sake of doing the oil change. The other thing is needing something to actually put the oil into. Being 9 litres, I've got 2 oil pans. That one's an 8 litre and this one's a 6 litre, I think. So between the two of them, I should be able to empty the oil out without spilling too much. So you need a 15mm spanner. Ring spanner. Don't use open-ended, that'll just burr the nut if you slip. You're better off with a ring, a solid ring or a socket, and that's going to be anti-clockwise to undo, clockwise to tighten, righty-tighty as they say. It can be a little bit tight to loosen off, but once it's done, it should be all fairly straightforward. Now, something I haven't mentioned, get my head in the shot, is this engine is completely cold. The oil will therefore be a little bit thicker and slower to pour. I often heat the engine up to operating temperature and then do it all while it's really hot. So the worst part here is trying to get this plug out without getting a handful of oil. So here we go. Done. Look at that, clean as a whistle. You'll see that there is a washer on the end of this nut, bolt I should say, and they should normally be replaced each time you do a service or an oil change. So keep that in mind. Always have a rag handy when you are servicing a car or putting engine oil in or out, because inevitably you'll spill a little bit. I can see a couple of drops forming already, which hopefully didn't go on me. Okay, so as the oil empties, the flow will get a little bit slower. You can see I've 3/4 filled the large can or large container, and just letting the rest of it run into the smaller container. It'll run a bit longer than normal because it's cold and thicker, but it's a pretty thin oil to start with, so yeah, you can see. The other thing is there should be a magnet on the end of this nut, and if there is any metallic particles in the oil, you'd see it on the end of the nut, but this is again clean as a whistle. So nothing to worry about as far as impurities, or I should say metal in the engine. Now while the oil's draining, I just want to talk about the oil filter clamps, or spanners, whatever you want to call them. There's a whole bunch of different types, and probably the most traditional and well known is this one, where as you pull on the lever, you would pull it on the direction that you want to turn it. It actually has a clamp or a belt, a steel belt, and that will actually clamp around the filter and slowly pull it in that direction. That's one. Another one is a bit of a modification on the same logic, where you just open it up and put it onto the filter housing, and as you turn it that way, it's going to clamp in on these surfaces to the actual filter, and that'll rotate it. And you only need to get it started. Once you've turned it about quarter turn, you should find in most cases that you can do it by hand. The one that I've found the most useful and easiest to use over the last few years has been this one. It actually has an adjusting screw to bring the size of this steel belt in or out. And again, same logic, you would put that around the filter, tighten it up until it actually clamps around the whole circumference of the filter, and then just turn it, and turn it as far as it can go in the space you've got, undo it a bit, turn it around the filter, and again, once you've got a quarter of a turn, you'll be able to undo it by hand anyway. I'm just going to double check that the replacement filter is the right size and specification before I take this one out. So just confirming, went onto the Ryco website, did a search by vehicle type, and Z663 and Z663 ST, both suitable. ST being for Syntec or high efficiency filter, so that's what I'm using in this particular case. I've said I'm going to use this clamp. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So just tightening up that belt so it suits the size of the filter. Again, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So I'm just going to go anti-clockwise to loosen this off slightly. So that's now fairly tight. And just 2 fingers, and there you go, it's already loosened that off. Now this is probably the messiest part of the oil change, because once you start to unwind this filter, it is going to release oil. I'm going to do it temporarily. After I take the oil filter out, I will remove the sump plug one more time for a quick check that there's no more oil sitting in the sump. And I can only hope I've got it right. So there's already oil starting to come out of that, as you may see. Having plenty of time, I'm just going to let it drip. Alright, messiest part of the job. So another advantage of changing the oil regularly, it's a bit cleaner than if you'd had this oil in for a long time. So again, you can see that oil starting to pour out. And there's no simple way to get around this. It's just the nature of the beast. All the oil flowing through the engine is flowing through the filter first, and this has to sit somewhere in the engine system. So there we go. So again, just letting that drain quickly, but you'll see that's the access to the oil system in your engine, and we'll give that a quick wipe down after it stops dripping. They are just good to look at, aren't they? Anyway, back into the job. So just going to give this a quick wipe down. It is still dripping a little bit. Okay, so oil filter normally comes with a plastic over the mating surface. So you'll see there'll be a rubber ring around the outside, the thread that it will screw back into the block with, and it's empty. So I like to, and most other people I speak to like to pour this, fill this up with oil before actually putting it back into the car. Because it's upside down, you can fill it with oil and then screw it in without losing too much. That ensures that at your first start up, after putting the oil in, it will actually be full of oil and therefore prevent any starvation of oil throughout the engine anywhere else in the system. So that's what my next step is now. So with my fresh oil, once that's in, I've already given my hands a quick clean. Just a dab of clean oil and lubricate or wet the rubber ring around the outside of that filter. That's now ready to go straight into the car. Just one more wipe to make sure it's clean. Now this is important. It's spinning up onto the thread. Now, as far as tightening these go, it's just touched the metal now. So once it's touched the metal, they say half a turn should be more than adequate to seal that rubber seal. So I can see the, I don't know, the manufacture date written across there. So I'll just turn it half a turn. In fact, that's probably more than enough to ensure that's sealed. Again, before I'm finished under here, and this is exactly the same as if you were to be on jack stands, lying down on the ground, no different whatsoever. I'm just going to take this out one more go. Any accumulated oil that had been making its way to the exit can come out before I tighten it back up and refill it. So you see a little bit of oil has accumulated there, not a lot, but I'm OCD when it comes to getting rid of old oil. To tell you the truth, this engine hasn't run for probably over 2 weeks. Been sitting on this hoist waiting for me to do the oil change. So yeah, while the car's still on its hoist, it's probably a good time just to have a quick check under, make sure there's nothing loose, nothing stuck under the undercarriage that shouldn't be under here. You'll notice from my earlier videos I've got the Baller S axle back. I've also got jacking blocks, so they do help if you are jacking your car up to make sure that you don't crush the chassis rails or the floor. These give a solid jacking point, so they stay on the car. You don't take them off. They just they've been there for I don't know how long now, a year, 18 months. But yeah, that helps you jacking the car up when you're sitting on the ground. But again, no leaks, nothing loose or rattling. Everything's where it should be. Again, being OCD, there's a bit of dirt and mud that I'd love to clean off before I pull it down, but I can do that outside of this video. Still dripping just a little bit out of the sump. I'm in no rush, so I'm happy for that to continue as long as it takes. While that oil's draining out, I thought I might use the opportunity just to talk about the sump plug. Now this has got a rubber washer, which isn't very common as far as my experience goes. The rubber will have the ability to compress and seal. I've never had a leak out of my engine. I can only assume it was done at the dealership for the last service that this was replaced. Should have been replaced, but I can't tell at first sight, but it does still have space for compression when it's done up against the sump. So that's a rubber seal. Another type of seal on the sump plug itself would be a crush washer. So these are made out of copper, and you'll see that there's a thickness to them, and these are made to crush as you tighten up the sump plug. So as that goes in with one of these, I've got two in there, but you only need one, that will crush against the bolt and the sump and create a seal. So that's a crush washer. And then the third type would be just an aluminium flat washer. Again, aluminium being a very soft metal, it will actually have a level of crush and malleability as you tighten up the sump plug to create a seal as well. So that's three different types of seals that go on your sump plug. I'm not going to mess with this one. It works, and there's never been a leak, so I'll keep this on until at least the next service and probably replace it then. I'll put the sump plug in. I've cleaned the plug off, nice and dry. Any residual oil is not going to be of any concern. When the plug first came out, if there was any solids or any material, metallic material, it would have either stuck to the sump or been forced out when I first took the sump plug out. So that residual oil will just be very thin remaining oil, which will mix in with the new oil and not cause a problem. Okay, so there is a torque setting for that. I can't tell you what it is at the moment, but it's about that much. So this is an alloy sump and a steel sump plug, so don't over tighten it and strip the thread, whatever you do. Okay, now to lower, clear. I'm only by myself, so there's no chance of crushing anyone. But make sure you've taken anything out from under there. This is the hydraulic ramp hoist. Done. Okay, now next thing will be catch can, just to check that it's got any oil in it and muck. So I'll do that now. This is a Mishimoto. They screw off from underneath. So as I say, oil's just coming out of the crankcase from underneath the piston area in the sump area, and at high revs, or at any revs when the engine's running, it will have impurities, carbon deposits and all sorts of gases being picked up, and normally this will go straight into the manifold to be burnt by the engine. And yes, I do have some residue muck. There'd be water in that, oil, carbon deposits, and you don't want to be burning that in your cylinders. So I'll give that a quick clean and chuck it back in. Okay, the catch can is back in, tightened up. Easier to get in than get out actually, so that's good. Now oil does not go in there or there or any other cap other than where the oil sign is. So on top of the engine, on the valve cover, take the oil cap off. It does actually give you the specification, and it also says Dexos. And then best off using a funnel so that you don't spill as you're putting the new oil in. Now I've got 6 litres in a bottle and 2 bottles, so obviously I'm not going to be using all of that. So I need to make sure that I don't overfill. And it is not good to overfill. More is not always best. Overfilling an engine will cause cavitation and it'll foam up. So don't overfill. You're better off getting close to where you need to be, then checking with the dipstick and going again. Remember, I have filled the oil filter, so I've already allowed for that. So around the 9 litres, I think. I'll double check, but I'll use the dipstick as I go. Gonna have to lift that up a bit higher, or else it's not going to go in. There we go. So I know I can at least put my first 6 litres in. I have got so many funnels. This one's got an elbow and just fits into the hole. Look at that, it holds itself in. So that's what I'm going to use. Okay, so here we go now. It's all going a lot faster.
Just gonna go off and do the groceries.
Alright,
Do you want anything?
you're on video.
Hey?
You're on video. So just looking on the service manual, engine oil 9.5 litres, refill with a filter. So yeah, 9.5 litres if you're going to put the oil replace the oil filter. These have little graduations on the side. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 litres, and it's up to here 6 litres at the moment. So I need to have 1, 2, 3 left in the container if it's full. Am I going to make it? Yep. There we go. So probably use the first litre out of that, or thereabouts. So I've got a bit to do. Almost a litre and a half. So we're getting closer now. Fortunately that oil didn't go anywhere except the rocker cover. So put the cap on, I'll just do a quick check on the dipstick. So we now have oil most of the way up that stick. I'll start the engine, let it settle, and then check it again. So it's running nice and quiet. There's that oil I spilt is now burning off, so it must have dripped a little bit on the exhaust. So I must have dropped a bit of oil under the exhaust, even though I thought I hadn't. But it burns off pretty quickly. Just leaves a bit of a smell, which I could do without. So I've just stopped the engine, so the oil will be in the system a bit. Just need to wipe the dipstick off again. So it has dropped, but there's oil almost to the top of that, I think. It definitely can do with another half litre anyway. Yeah, 12 litres minus 9.5 gives you 2.5 knot brake. It's had a chance to sit a bit, so I'll just wipe it once for luck. And it's pretty much sitting at the very top of the serrated edge. Full but not over full. Now a couple of things you'll notice. I do have a Rotofab cover for my plastic coolant bottle, which I think should have been standard. I hate the look of that white plastic bottle in this engine bay, but it still gives you a little viewfinder, and you can see that I'm fine on coolant. Give it another year or two before I worry about flushing the coolant. I did have some top up from when I put this cover on, and it seems to have held its own. You'll see the overflow at the bottom, and this is the reservoir that's directly connected to the cooling system, which stays absolutely full to the top. So that's how that works. The other thing is I do have a Rotofab dry filter. So I might pull that off and just give it a blow with the compressed air, but it hasn't been in a lot of dusty conditions. It's done 10,000 Ks, which is what, 7,500 miles or something. So, and the first 1,000 or so Ks didn't have this filter, it had the stock filter. So yeah, once again, part of a service, you're looking at these things, you're inspecting, cleaning, making sure that they're all in good condition. So don't forget those. The other thing that I'll try to access is the air conditioning filter, and once I find it, I'll update you on that one too. To reset your remaining oil level warning, you need to start the car. Always happy to do that. Okay, so it's going to tell me my bonnet is open, oil needs changing soon, so I'll just clear those. Now I'll just flick through to the oil warning. Here we are here. Remaining oil life is 0, so I'm going to hold the button down. And it's back to 100%. So when I say the button, it's the select button here. Very easy, so you won't get those warnings now when you start the engine up. Okay, so that's the key to engine oil change and filter. Make sure you have a look under the car, there's no leaks, and go for a test drive, which I'm about to do now. And then the job is done. As I say, go through your service book, make sure you've checked, inspected, and changed everything as per the service schedule to get the best out of your car. So just returned from a quick drive around the block. Car runs fine, and no leaks. Engine is warm. Bit of condensation when the engine started that comes out the pipes. Not to be worried about that, that's normal. Water is a byproduct of the catalytic converters. No leaking from the sump plug. No leaking from the oil filter. So we're all good.